Hi, and welcome to Merck Manufacturing, where we make life-saving medicines and vaccines for the world. Today we're going to explore the value stream for Primaxin, a broad-spectrum antibiotic used to treat aggressive bacterial infections. Let's take a look. As we explore this value stream, we'll be using the 5 coaching Kata questions.
So Dwayne, as we were saying, how can I help you?
Well, Raul, thanks for asking. It is time for me to walk this value stream again. But before I do, I'd really like to know your thoughts on where you're taking this value stream.
That's a good question. As you know, as a company, we have the strategic goal of increasing production, maintaining the cost,
Right.
without increasing headcount. Now, for the Primaxin stream, we actually are looking forward to increase from 500 to 600 trays per shift without increasing the headcount.
Okay.
Now, you know, Primaxin as a value stream have 4 different loops. You have the pacemaker loop. That includes filling as well as packaging. Then upstream from there, you have the bulk manufacturing.
Okay.
Before that, you have the supplies inspection. And at the very beginning, you have the receiving process.
Okay.
What areas would you like to see of this value stream?
So I think for this visit and this walk, I'd really like to focus on working way back in the product testing and take a look at a part of the filling process and looking at the vial loading operation, and then further upstream looking at the supply inspection loop. That sound reasonable?
Absolutely. Now, before I let you go, do you know what you're looking at?
Explain.
So, let me see. Could you hold this for me for a minute?
Sure.
It's my iPhone, tape.
Oh my gosh.
Here's my badge, lip gloss. I know I have it somewhere.
What you got in
Car
there?
keys, bungee,
G-core. What in the...
the 5 questions. This is Primaxin. Here you go.
Okay.
Now, the one thing I want you to do, after you're done with your walk, please come back and let me know how it went.
Deal.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Take care.
Dave,
Dwayne,
good to see you.
good afternoon.
Appreciate the
Good to
time.
see you as well.
So as I walk around the site, I'm really focusing in on a lot of the good work that everybody's doing as it relates to the overall challenge
Yes.
that's out there. Can you share for me your perspective on what the challenge is?
Yes, my perspective on the challenge is for us to support the increase in production from 500 trays per shift to 600 trays per shift without adding any additional resources.
Okay, wonderful. So then teach me a little bit about what is your target condition.
Yes, in the chemical lab to support release testing of Primaxin, my current target condition is to develop and implement a 3-roll system using 3 chemists across the level workload.
Okay. And by when do you think you can achieve this?
End of next month.
Okay, great. So make a connection for me
Sure.
as to how this target condition relates back to the challenge that you shared just a second ago.
Yes. How this relates back to the challenge is that we're going to support the increased rate for the Primaxin value stream using these 3 chemists. At the same time, we'll be moving one of the chemists to support another area.
Okay, good. So what is actually happening now?
Currently, we have a 4-roll system. This is also a level workload system where we are working at a velocity of testing 4 batches per day.
Okay. All right. So share with me what you think the obstacles are that are preventing you from achieving your target condition.
Sure. The obstacles that we are working against are differences in how chemists work.
Okay.
Also, chemists work different hours. I have 2 chemists that work 4 10-hour days. I have 1 chemist that works 5 8-hour days.
Okay.
And thirdly, long paperwork process on roll 1.
Okay. So what is the obstacle that you're working on now?
The long paperwork process involving roll number 1.
All right. So let's take a step back.
Sure.
And let's take a look at and reflect on the last step that you took to address this obstacle. What was the step?
The step was to try the three-roll system out.
All right. What did you expect in this experiment?
I expected that we would be able to learn what changes needed to be made to implement this system successfully.
Okay. And then what actually did happen?
Looking at our data and our graph, the 5 points across the three rolls, we realized that roll number 1 is too long versus the other 2 rolls.
Okay. So Dave, then tell me what your next step is going to be.
My next step is to analyze the paperwork process.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about how you plan to do that.
Sure. I plan on interviewing my chemist and gain a better understanding of how they're working across the standard work for roll 1, and particularly the paperwork process.
And what are you expecting to learn?
I'm expecting to learn the steps, the sequence, and times for the current paperwork process.
Okay. So when can we go and see what you have learned through the execution of this next step?
Tomorrow at the same time.
Okay, great. Dave, I appreciate your time. You and your team are using a great systematic approach. I really appreciate it. Keep going.
Thank you, Dwayne.
George, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Appreciate your time. Hey, I've got some time on the plant today. Really walking around and see how we're doing our business and looking at the overall challenge that's in place for this value stream. Can you share for me?
Sure can. Primax and Filling is currently operating at about 500 trays per shift output. We want to increase that to 600 trays per shift without incurring any increase in headcount.
Okay, great, very clear. Relate that back to you and your business as to what is your target condition.
Our target condition is essentially an efficient loading method that can be done with a single operator and allow them to load every 15 to 30 seconds.
Okay, great. So then teach me a little bit more about how that relates back to the overall challenge.
What that does is that will allow me to use one of the operators that we currently use in a different core task.
Okay. So then what's actually happening now?
Our actual condition now is we're loading every 50 to 60 minutes, and then we swap an operator out to continue our loading.
Okay. So let's go through what are the obstacles that you think are preventing you from achieving your target condition?
I've got a few. Multiple vendor configuration, impact on washer end feed, and poor ergonomics.
Okay. And which one of these are you working on now?
Multiple vendor configuration.
Okay. All right. So let's take a step back and let's look at and reflect on the last step that you took in an attempt to resolve this obstacle.
Okay. Last step was to test a prototype with our Gersheimer and shot trays.
All right. And what did you expect to learn?
We wanted to determine if the trays were the same or if they were different.
All right. And what actually happened?
We found out that shot and Gersheimer trays are actually different.
Wow, okay. And what's the value in that learning?
We have to modify the prototype to work with all tray configurations.
Okay. So with that then, what is your next step?
Next step is to test the prototype with Gersheimer and shot trays.
Tell me a little bit more about how you plan to go about doing that.
I'll get the mechanics together. We'll look at putting some spacers in to separate the holdback block from the side of the prototype.
All right. And what do you expect?
I expect that all of the vendor configurations will work as planned.
All right, great. Okay, George, so when can we go and see what you have learned by taking this next step?
We can see it tomorrow at the next coaching cycle.
All right, great. George, I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
It's very apparent that you and your team are following a very scientific and systematic approach and method here.
Thank you.
Keep going. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning, Dwayne.
Good to see you again. Really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me this morning. I really would like to just get going and understanding a little bit more about the challenge that you and the rest of the site are working to accomplish.
Well, our challenge in the Primaxin value stream is to increase our production rate by 500 trays per shift to 600 trays per shift, and we need to accomplish this with our existing headcount.
Okay, great. So now let's take it down a level and talk a little bit more about how that relates to you and your team What is the target condition that you're striving to achieve?
Well, supplies inspection, our piece of the value stream, we need to establish a workflow system in this area that's both planned and leveled.
Okay. And by when are you looking to achieve this?
By the end of the year, which is 4 months from now.
Okay. So teach me and tell me a little bit more about how then this target condition relates back to the challenge that you just shared.
Well, we need additional capacity, and we predict that if we can get our work into a planned and level state, then we'll have the capacity to support the value stream challenge.
Okay. Very good. So then what is actually happening now?
Currently, our work is 80% unplanned, and it's not leveled.
Okay.
There are a number of interruptions that occur throughout the day that create this unplanned state, and you can see them in this graph here.
Wow. Okay. Very good. All right. So let's move on. So then what obstacles do you think are preventing you from achieving your target condition?
We have 4 obstacles that we've identified. One being that deliveries come in batches. We get a large number of batches of materials at one time. Another being interruptions, and in particular, the supplies inspection personnel being interrupted to go back into the warehouse and direct the movement of materials.
Okay.
A third is the occasional high reject rate of particular materials that come in. And the fourth was that everyone on the supplies inspection team is not cross-trained to do all activities.
Okay. Very good. Sounds comprehensive. So which one are you addressing now?
Now we're working on the supplies inspection personnel going into the warehouse to direct the movement of materials, the interruptions that activity causes.
Okay, great. So let's take a step back and let's reflect on the last step that you took in order to address this obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
Let's walk through this. So what was the step that you took?
Well, our step was to try to have the receivers in the warehouse direct material movement.
Okay. And what did you expect?
We expected really just to learn what we needed to work on.
Okay.
And to be able to make that transition.
All right. What actually happened, though?
Well, what happened is that the receivers didn't have the sampling plan and didn't know how to interpret the ANSI tables, so they didn't have the information they needed to direct material movement.
All right. And in the end, what did you learn?
We learned that the receivers need additional information and some instruction.
Okay. So share with me now, if you will, the next step that you plan on taking, your next cycle.
Our next step is to assess the information that the receivers will need to be able to direct material movement.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about how you plan on taking that step.
Well, we currently have a sampling plan that has a lot of information in it, and so we want to go through that and identify which pieces the receivers need for directing material movement.
And who will do that?
I'll probably sit down with that plan and go through and try to determine which pieces of information are needed.
Okay, good. And what do you expect with this step?
Well, we expect to learn what we need to put into a job aid for the receivers.
Okay, great. So then when can we go see what you have learned from taking this next step?
Tomorrow afternoon, we should have identified the information that the receivers need.
Okay, great. Well, Alan, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me this morning, and it sounds like you guys are well on your way. I really encourage you and the team to continue following the scientific process that you've taken. Mm-hmm. Well done.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for joining us here at Merck. We hope you find the improvement kata as thought-provoking as we do, and consider making it a part of the way you do work.